Good evening, everyone. My name is Judy Blake, and we are located in Houston, Texas. I am a program coordinator for Family to Family Network. We're very happy that you joined us this evening. I have with me two of my coworkers. The first one is Leslie Lawson.
Hello.
There's Leslie waving. And we also have all the way from the Philippines, Uni Patron. She is an intern who is with us, and she is joining us for the next couple of months. Say hi, Uni.
Hello, everyone.
So we're so happy to have everyone join us today. So to the person who just joined us, CALIS, can I have your full name, please? Okay, I'll find out. No problem. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We are so glad that you have joined us. Next slide, please. We are going to be talking about special education and what you need to know. So just a few housekeeping notes. This is a very safe place. Just know that if there's any question that you want to ask, no question is silly. We want to make sure that you have the answers, and this is a judgment-free space. We know there is a lot of information, and we don't expect you to remember everything. All questions are welcome, but if you could, wait until the end when the presentation is finished so we can make sure that we get through all of the material. We know that some people like to be anonymous, so if you don't feel comfortable asking a question, please feel free to just private message myself or Leslie or Uni, and we will ask the question anonymously on your behalf. Please make sure that you keep yourself muted. And we should finish in an hour. We actually finished on time when we had the class today at noon, and then we had about 10 minutes of Q&A. But it might run over just a little bit. So you will be sent the slides when the presentation is finished. And there is a survey that we will need for you to complete. We don't know who is completing the survey, so everything remains anonymous. And unless you have a question, then we would need your name. Next slide, please. So some of you may already know these abbreviations and some of you may not. So if your child is already in school, some of these abbreviations hopefully are familiar to you. But if you're just starting out, one of the abbreviations is ECI, and that stands for Early Childhood Intervention. So if you have a child that is 0 to 3 years old, you probably have an ECI coordinator, or you did have an ECI coordinator. If you moved here from another state, maybe just found out that your child had a disability and they were age 4, ECI may not sound familiar to you. But that is the department within the county that helps families who have a child from birth to 3 years old. Once your child turns 3 years old, from ages 3 to 5, they then can possibly participate in early childhood special education. I have an adult son who is going to be 29, and back when he was a youngster and turned 3 years old, they used to call the program PPCD, Preschool Program for Children with Disabilities, but now they have changed it, and it's Early Childhood Special Education. So that would be for families who have a child who just turned 3 and until they hit kindergarten. Everything that we discuss is based on what we call IDEA, and that stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is not law that I came up with or Leslie came up with or Uni. This is federal law. And that federal law ensures that our public schools, and that includes charter schools, by the way, that they are serving the educational needs of students with disabilities. We want to make sure that you're educated so that you're empowered and you can advocate for your child. So this might be familiar to you. It's called ARD, and that stands for Admission, Review, and Dismissal. So when the school says we need to schedule an ARD meeting, that's what they're talking about. It's to either evaluate your child, review information, or possibly dismiss. But they're called ARD meetings. And in those ARD meetings, they discuss that individualized education plan. And the abbreviation for that is IEP. So keep in mind that the IEP that I had for my son would be different than what you have for your child or what Leslie had for her son. The key word here is individualized. It's not cookie cutter. It's not one size fits all. It should be a plan that works best for your child. Some of our children might have behavior challenges, and this just happens. You know, school can be stressful. They're with other kids. They're trying to get used to the teacher, maybe the environment. Maybe there's a lot going on at home. And sometimes when there's those challenging behaviors, parents can request what we call an FBA, and that stands for Functional Behavioral Assessment. And we're going to go into that in a little bit, but we just wanted you to be familiar with that abbreviation. So once that FBA is completed, the school will then develop what they call a behavior intervention plan. And the abbreviation for that is called BIP, BIP. Next slide, please. So the purpose of IDEA, as I mentioned before, it ensures that children with disabilities have access and have available to them that free, appropriate public education. That education should be emphasizing special education and related services, things like speech, occupational therapy, other kinds of therapy. And those services need to be designed so they meet the unique needs of your child. The goal of IDEA is to prepare your child for further education, employment, and independent living. Now, some of you on this call might have young children and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine them living on their own or employment or post-secondary education. We understand that. But the goal of the IDEA and that free and appropriate education is to make sure that your child is prepared for it to the extent possible. College and career readiness. I think there's a little bit more on that slide, Uni. Oh, no, I guess not. Okay. Next slide, please. So what happens when your child turns 3 years old? And Uni, if you could just show one bullet at a time, that would be great. This is, oh, okay. Thank you. You're good. So they're no longer in ECI and they transfer to the public school. So what your ECI service coordinator is going to do is they are going to conduct a planning meeting, and they're going to make sure that this is done at least 90 days before your child turns 3. So when they turn 2 years and 9 months old, if your child is 2 years and 9 months, they should be scheduling a meeting with your school to prepare you for transition to public school. Now, the meeting can take place 9 months before, when your child is 2 years and 3 months old, but generally it's usually closer to the 2 years, 9 months. And the purpose of this meeting is for you as parents to meet the school district people, and that would be of your neighborhood school. Next bullet point. So the parent, your child's therapist, if you want them to, if there is one, the ECI service coordinator, and a public school representative should attend this transition meeting. You can invite other people. It's whatever you would like. Some parents don't, and some parents do. It's whatever works best for you and what you feel comfortable with. If your child has been in speech therapy for 1.5 years and you want the speech therapist there, that's up to you, and you can certainly do that. You can show the rest of the slide, Uni. So your ECI service coordinator, what they're going to do is they're going to develop a plan with steps so that your child transitions smoothly out of that ECI program. And they're going to help you figure out if your child is eligible for special education services. They're going to help you learn about the services, explore other options, and help you in determining what needs to be considered for your child. If your child might be eligible for special education, they must refer your child to your local school district with your consent. It's really important to remember that everything that happens with your child, you as the parent or legal guardian or primary caregiver, you must provide your consent. The school can't do anything without you agreeing to it. So this document here, this is a wonderful website, Navigate Life Texas. And if you click on that link, it talks about Beyond ECI, and it explains what happens, what your rights are, and how the process should be. Next slide, please. Leslie, you want to take over from here?
Okay.
Great. Oh, and quick question. For Callie and Alex, if you could just either private message me or type in the chat box what your last names are or the names you registered with, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so
Can you
we're
repeat
still
one more
talking.
time? I'm sorry, what do you need for me to do?
No, oh, Alex, I just needed to know your last name.
I registered already. That's what I received this link to register already previous.
Right, but I just needed to know what was the last name that you registered with, because we could have multiple Alexes.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
You can private message me if you want.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Judy.
Sure.
So we're still talking about the timeline for a student or a child that's coming from ECI into the public school. Because the timeline is going to be different if they weren't in ECI. So when the school receives notice from ECI, they have to evaluate your child within 45 days of receiving that notice. Another thing I wanted to say is everything we're talking about today is what should happen in best case scenario, but it's always up to you. Don't take anything for granted. It's always up to you to make sure all of this happens. So the school has to evaluate within 45 days. And then after conducting the full and individual evaluation in every area of suspected disability, they'll have an ARD meeting. And that ARD meeting must take place within 30 days of the evaluations being completed. If your child's transitioning from ECI to public school and your child qualifies for special education services, the school must allow your child to start on their 3rd birthday. Of course, unless it's on a holiday or a weekend. But 3 means 3. They can't say, oh, you got to wait or this or that. So that's really important. 3 means 3. Next slide. So the timelines here for a student that was not in early childhood intervention, and early childhood intervention is 0 to 3. Let's say your child didn't do that. Then you must request in writing for your child to be evaluated. If you just ask or tell somebody over the phone or mention it, the timeline does not start. You have to put your request in writing. And the parent handbook we're going to talk about in a little bit has great sample letters in there that you can use and just change a little bit to meet your specific needs. Once the school gets your written request, the school has 15 days to provide you with a chance to give them written consent for the evaluation. They can't do the evaluation without you agreeing to that and providing your signature. And again, your child should be evaluated in every area of suspected disability. So you want to make sure that happens. You don't want them to miss any pieces. If the school, sometimes a school do something like a screening, and if they refuse to conduct the evaluation, they have to provide you with your procedural safeguards that explains what your rights are and what to do if you disagree. So the procedural safeguards are very important. You don't have to sit down and read the whole thing at one time, but you definitely want to read over the procedural safeguards and know what to do if you disagree with their decision at this point or at any other point later on. They have 45 school days to do the evaluation after you sign consent. And then they have 30 calendar days to have a meeting with you, the ARD meeting, after the evaluations are complete to review the results and determine if your child is eligible. And then at that point, they would develop the IEP, the individual education plan for your child. Next slide. So let's talk about some things you need to remember. Always keep copies of any written documents for your records. Anybody can refer your child for an evaluation. Let's say your child is already in school and not receiving any services. A teacher could refer them, or anybody at the school, or a parent. So, but the first thing they're going to do is, the first part of an evaluation is going to be a review of any existing data. It's called a READ, review of existing evaluation data. And that's part of every evaluation. And I know one time I saw where the child was just coming into the school and they said, oh, we can't do a READ. Well, yeah, they would want to gather information. If the school doesn't have any information, they would want to gather information from the parents. And if the school or if the child had been in any private therapies, that would be part of the READ also. You have the right to ask what evaluations and tests are going to be used and how they'll be used to develop the IEP. And the school has to send you written notice if they recommend an evaluation or if they decline to do the evaluation. So they couldn't just one day decide, oh, I'm going to do an evaluation. They have to let you know. There's always got to be parental consent. And you have due process rights every step of the way, and that's why it's so important to read your procedural safeguards. Next slide. This is just kind of a visual of how things work. You're going to have your full individual evaluation. That's on the bottom because that's going to be the foundation. And from the evaluation, you're going to have, this is after your student has already started school, you're going to have their levels of performance, what they can do now, or even if your child hasn't started school, you're going to help with the present levels, like what they can do now, what they have trouble with. And then based on that, they're going to develop IEP goals and objectives. And the goals and objectives should always be tied to the present levels of academic and functional performance, just like the present levels are tied to the evaluation and any information provided by parents or outside people. everything's connected. And then once the goals and objectives are written, they're going to talk about supplementary and aids and services. So what types of services and aids does your child need to be successful in the school environment? Like maybe speech therapy, maybe in-class support from a paraprofessional. And then after all of that is done, that's when you should start talking about where services are going to be, where the special education services are going to take place. Are they going to take place in the regular ed classroom with support? Are they going to be pulled out for resource? Are they going to be in a more segregated environment? But that should be last, because we don't know what the best placement for the child is going to be until we have all the other information in place. Next slide. Again, this is just more about the read. One thing I want to bring up is the school's required to do an evaluation, a reevaluation, not more than one. They can't do it more than once a year, but they're only required to do it every 3 years unless it's requested by teacher or the parent. And the read is always going to be part of that. And sometimes for students' 3-year reeval, a read is done, and that helps them determine, do we need any new evaluations? But what happens sometimes is for that 3-year reeval, they do a read, but they don't do any new formal evaluation that might be needed. So it's important for you to know that. Anytime there's going to be a new formal evaluation, you should have an evaluation report from the person that did the evaluation with your child. Next slide. So these are some areas that your child might be evaluated for. They're not all of them. Your child may not be evaluated for all of these areas, but it's important for you to know what areas are being evaluated. That way, if they miss one, then you can bring it up, and it should be on the consent form. Because let's say you have a child and they evaluate, there's strict timelines on that initial evaluation, but there's no set in stone timelines for evaluations later on. And so it could drag out. Let's say they do the initial evaluation and you didn't realize, oh, they didn't evaluate for speech and language, and your child needed to be evaluated in that area. So you would want to bring it up at the very beginning so you can make sure everything's done in a timely manner. Next slide. Again, you have rights all through this evaluation process, but just because you have these rights doesn't mean that they're going to happen. So it's important for you to know your rights so you can if it's important to you, you can make sure all of this happens. So it's really important to know. Here's the handbook. This is a very parent-friendly handbook, the IDEA manual. It's online. You can print it out. I printed one out. I had the pages tabbed, different information highlighted. I brought it with me to every meeting with the school, because I feel like if the school knows that you know your rights, you'll be treated as an equal member of the ARD committee. So again, you have the right to be given notice anytime the school's going to evaluate or refuses to evaluate. Know about all areas that are being evaluated. If you want descriptions and explanations of what procedures and tests they're going to use, you have a right to that. And always get a copy of the evaluation report before your ARD meeting, so you can look over that and have the same information they have, so you can be an equal member of that ARD meeting. And also, you may not understand that evaluation report, and you may want to meet with the diagnostician before the meeting so you can have it explained, so you can be prepared for the meeting. And all of the information should be considered in the meeting, even if you have any outside evaluations. They don't have to follow outside evaluations, but they do have to consider them. And of course, the evaluations and test materials should be in the language that's most likely to provide accurate information on your child. Be sure that evaluations and tests that are used are appropriate for your child, and no single test, like an IQ test, should be used as the only basis for determining if they're eligible or not. Next slide. Okay, so your child's been evaluated and you don't necessarily think the evaluation is a good picture of your child, or you don't think it's complete, or you don't agree with their recommendations that are based on this evaluation. You can ask the school to do more testing, and you can also ask for the school to do an independent education evaluation at their expense, an IEE. And that's where they can give you a list, but you don't have to pick from their list, but there are some parameters, but you could have a second opinion done from somebody not associated with the school district, as long as they agree to a contract for the school to pay them. And I think they have to be in a certain number of miles near the school district. Now, that independent evaluation definitely will make a difference, could make a difference. They have to consider it. They don't have to follow all the recommendations from the outside evaluator, but it could play a big role. You have to put this request in writing. And again, there's great sample letters in the IDEA manual to help you do this if you ever need an IEE. And the school has to grant an IEE if requested, or if they don't want to grant it, they'd have to take you to due process to show that their evaluation is appropriate. And generally the schools do grant IEEs at their expense, because it would cost them a lot more to go through a due process hearing, and they don't really want to do that any more than you do. Next slide. So you might want to go meet with the teacher or the case manager or the diagnostician before the meeting to discuss possible goals. You might want to give your input. You don't have to do this. This is a best practice, but a lot of times I did that with my son, and it made our ARD meeting go so much smoother because we had already hashed out the goals and objectives, and we were really prepared to just go through the meeting, and we all pretty much agreed on those. You are the most important member of the ARD committee, because you know your child the best. Nobody knows your child like you do, and you are the expert in your child. Of course, the other people sitting at the table are experts in their area, but you're the experts on your child. The meeting has to be scheduled at a mutually agreed upon time that works for you and the school. They can't just say, oh, we're having the meeting and you have to be there, and maybe you couldn't get off of work or whatever. But they should work with you, and you work with them to come up at a mutually agreed upon time and date. Be sure and let them know ahead of time if you need an interpreter. Make sure you request and get copies of all evaluation reports, draft present levels, draft IEP goals and objectives in writing or through the computer before the meeting. You don't want to be sitting in that meeting and be trying to look over things for the first time, because then you wouldn't be participating in the conversation that they're having at that time. So you want to be prepared as much as possible so you can be an equal member of the art committee. Bring somebody with you that knows your child, whether it be your spouse, a good friend, another family member, somebody to give you some support, because it can be very intimidating walking in there by yourself and there's like 6 of them and just you. So try to bring somebody with you. They can be moral support. They can take notes for you. They can help remind you what questions to ask. If you can, don't go alone. You always want to make sure all required members of the art committee are there, and there is a list of who should be at your art meeting in the IDEA manual. Next slide. Okay, so these are 2 different publications. The school has to give you access to the notice of procedural safeguards at least once a year, or if you're going to due process or file a complaint. The IDEA parent handbook is online and you can print that out. I really like it because it is very parent friendly and has those sample letters in there. But the procedural safeguards is another very good document to have, and look over it, because they explain some things that aren't explained as well in the IDEA parent manual. So you have a right to information in writing, to know they have to in writing show you if they propose to do something or they refuse to do something. And that's all through all these processes: the identification of your child's disability, the evaluation, reevaluation, dismissal, the placement of your child, where they're going to receive their services, and how your child is going to be provided a free and appropriate education. Next slide. And that's called prior written notice. So anytime the school proposes or refuses to do something, they have to let you know why they're making the decision, what information they use to make this decision, describe other choices that the IEP committee considered before they chose this way to go, or the reasons why those choices were rejected. And this notice, this prior written notice, should be written in your native language. That sometimes it can be part of the ARD meeting, but it needs to be in writing. Like, for example, if you requested a change in placement, or you requested just anything that you request or they propose, it needs to be in writing somewhere. If it's not in writing, it's not going to happen sometimes, or it never happened. So there's no paper trail, and you always want to have a good paper trail. Next slide. There are additional considerations for some students and all students. So all students in the IEP process, they should talk about assistive technology, extended school year services, and graduation later if the child's of the right age. But those are some things that they will consider for all students. And then for some students, these other things are going to be considered: autism, behavior, communication, limited English proficiency, if they have a vision impairment or blindness, or deaf, or hard of hearing. So just know that all of these things can be looked at, but all students, you should at least discuss assistive technology, EYS, and a graduation for all students. Next slide. So we're probably going to do a whole training on the autism supplement, and these are strategies for students who are on the autism spectrum. And it is 11 extra protections for students who have a diagnosis of autism. And these are things that they have to consider. And this autism, if you have a student with autism and you've had an ARD meeting, go look at your IEP paperwork. There should be an autism supplement in there. If you have a student with autism and don't know what this is, you should know what this is. And it should be very specific to your child. If your student doesn't have autism, these are some great strategies that you might work for your kid too. They're not required to have this supplement in their paperwork, but they're things to help you think about. Just because they're on here for students with autism doesn't mean your student couldn't have access to some of these things, or you shouldn't. You should discuss some of these things for some students that don't have autism. But if you have a student with autism, there's an autism supplement. My son's autism supplement was very specific to him. It should look different than other people's. So some things may be the same, but it shouldn't be cookie cutter information. And if anybody would like to see a sample of a well-written autism supplement, I'd be happy to share my son's with you guys. Just email me or email Judy and she'll forward it to me. Next slide. If you have a child who has behaviors that interfere with learning, you can ask for, in writing, of course, a formal functional behavioral assessment. And this should be done by a qualified person like a licensed school psychologist or a behavior analyst, a BCBA. Special education teachers, they have a lot of training, but some of them don't have specific training in behavior. And I see a lot of times they have the teacher do the FBA and the behavior intervention plan. And if that works, great. But if your student continues to have behaviors that are interfering with their learning and causing the child to be placed in a more restrictive environment, you definitely want to have one done by a qualified professional. And they would come and observe your child over different parts of the day, see what's happening before, during, and after the behavior, how the teachers and paras and everybody is responding to the behaviors, and help come up with a behavior intervention plan and train the staff how to implement the behavior intervention plan. Just because it's on paper doesn't mean the staff knows how to implement it correctly. If for some reason the school has already done a formal FBA and behavior intervention plan and it's not working, you can ask for an independent one to be done at the school's expense. So just keep that in mind if you have a student that is having challenging behaviors. Next slide. Least restrictive environment. So some people might want to call it mainstreaming or inclusion, but the whole spirit of the IDEA law requires students who need special education services to be educated in the least restrictive setting appropriate to their individual needs. And it doesn't mean that we place a student in a very restrictive setting and they have to work their way out, because that settings, they may not have appropriate behavior or speech or social skills models in that restrictive setting. So to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities should be educated with their non-disabled peers with all the supports and supplementary aids and services that are available. it doesn't have to look just like a typical student for a student with a disability to be in regular ed. They can have supports, they can have supplementary aids, they can have para support, they could have just modified curriculum and accommodations so they can learn in the general ed setting, because it's going to be, general ed is going to look very different than a totally segregated environment. Next slide. And preschool options, a lot of times people think when your student is coming in from ECI, or maybe they're just turning 3 or 4, that there's only a segregated setting, but there are different settings for preschool students too. We have to remember that special education is a service and it's not a place. Related services like speech, OTPT can be provided in a variety of settings. There's also for the 3 to 5, there's also something called dual enrollment, where children, maybe they stay home or attend a private preschool at the family's expense, or maybe they go to ABA therapy, and then they go to school, public school part of the day. So there's so many different combinations of what you could do and what may or may not be right for your child. Head Start's another one. Some students go to a Head Start program, and they can receive special education services at Head Start. Some students, instead of being in the preschool program or the special ed program for 3 to 5, some of them instead go to pre-kindergarten and have special ed support in that setting. So there's a lot of different ways for your child to be included in the regular education setting. A segregated placement on a specific campus in your district may or may not be at your home school. When my son was in the early childhood program, this was a long time ago, he's 31 now, our home campus that my other son went to, they didn't have the PPCD program, so he had to go to a different elementary school campus. Wasn't very far from our home, but you know, he wasn't at the same school with my other son and all the neighborhood kids, so that was hard. And that was way before I knew a whole lot about our special education rights. So next slide. I think it's so important for us to always have high expectations for our kids and for ourselves, and know that you're a very important part of the decision-making progress. If you have a child that's pre-kindergarten age or whatever age they are, familiarize yourself with the curriculum. It's all online. It doesn't necessarily mean that your child has to master every single thing that the typical students master, but know what it is. That way there are things you can work on at home, kind of prepare them for. And you know, a lot of children with disabilities need accommodations or modifications. So accommodations kind of level the playing field, things like sitting at the front of the room, or maybe they need a pencil grip, things like that, where modifications maybe change how much of the curriculum they're responsible for. All young children benefit from a very language-rich classroom that promotes speech and early learning. So go visit your child's classroom, see what's going on in there. Is there a lot of, you know, speech, or is it really quiet? Is nobody talking? You know, are they reading to them? So go check it out. And young children, the good preschool programs, they're going to teach the really young children through developmental skills through play. So that's really important for the real young children. Another thing, transportation is a related service that should be discussed in the IEP meeting. And the district is obligated to provide transportation in most cases. Now, if you transfer your child to, if you have an open district where you can transfer to different schools within your district, sometimes they won't provide transportation if you're the one choosing the district transfer. So, but be sure and talk about transportation if it's needed. Next slide. So this is one of the most important things I can tell you is that at the end of every BARD meeting or IEP meeting, whichever you choose to call it, you have to sign your name and check either agree or disagree. Parents, of course, should always work together with the committee to come to an agreement. But if you don't understand something or you don't agree with the complete IEP document, then you should not be agreeing. That is a legal document. You wouldn't go to a bank and sign a loan agreement if you didn't know the terms of the loan, or you didn't know, how many payments you had or how much your payments were going to be. The IEP is something that the school is required to follow. So if you don't agree or you don't understand, you should check disagree. There's a whole process for what happens if you disagree. Now, if you have a meeting, I've been hearing a lot of this lately. Oh, they only scheduled 1 hour for our meeting and we weren't finished. Well, that's different than ending the meeting in a disagreement. If you have an ARD meeting and you run out of time, don't be rushed into agreeing. They can table the ARD where they're just stopping the ARD meeting and scheduling another time to come back and finish. Now, if they don't agree to do that, of course, you would want to check disagree, because that will force them to have a 10-day recess ARD where you come back to the table to hopefully come to an agreement. But if you disagree, if you agree, you're agreeing to that whole document. If you disagree, and you don't do anything after the 10-day recess ARD, that's the same thing as agreeing with them, because you have to act. So it's very important to learn what to do if you do disagree. Now, I'm not saying we should go in there and disagree about every little thing, but if there's something really important that you don't feel is right, sometimes amazing things can happen if you do disagree, because what happens is you have a 10-day recess ARD. Everybody brings more information that supports their side of what they think should happen. And if you come to an agreement, then great. If not, disagree again. And then you have to use your procedural safeguards. You have to, if you want something different to happen. So you have to either file a complaint, file for mediation, or file for due process. And then when you file one of those things, the first thing the Texas Education Agency does is they tell the school to have a resolution meeting with the parents. And that's where things you generally get worked out. And people a lot of times don't even have to go through with any of those procedural safeguards, because everything gets resolved, because at that point they know your rights, and they know what to do if you disagree. So of course, we always want to be nice, and we always want to try to work with the school and come to an agreement. And these are the links for the IDEA manual that is online, and it's in Spanish. The procedural safeguards are in just about every language there is. So the school should give you that, but if not, you can get that at SpedTex. Next file. Please, please, please take the survey. Take the survey, we'll send you the slides, and it really helps us know what we're doing right, know what we need to work on, and it also helps us to get grants to try to keep these trainings going. Judy?
Thank you so much, Leslie. I think there were a couple of questions, and I also put the survey link in the comments. Uni, if you could stop sharing your screen. Oh, Alex, I need to know the last name or the name that you registered with. So either unmute yourself, or if you can private message me in the chat for Judy Blake. I need to know your name so I can send you the slides. We had a question, how much the school should provide the IEE? Could they refuse, saying they do not have resources? Good question, Michelle. I can answer, or Leslie can answer, but bottom line is, if you request that independent education evaluation, the school has to provide it.
Or take you to due process.
That's right.
Lack of resources or lack of personnel is not a reason to deny services, needed services to a child.
Yeah, they have to do it. They have to. It's just really important, as Leslie mentioned, to have everything in writing. We had one of these trainings this afternoon, and one of the moms said, well, I told the school, they're so overwhelmed. They get overwhelmed like we get overwhelmed, and everything has to be in writing. Give them a couple of days. You don't hear anything back, email them again. I think that was it. Oh, great. Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate it. Oh, Michelle, so the link was broken that I sent you? That's weird because I updated all of the links. Let me see. Let me look right now. Hold on one second, Michelle. And let me do that. Does anyone have any other questions? So the second that you log off, it's going to bring you right to the survey link. Please, please make sure that you complete it. Michelle, let me look up that link real quick. Hold on.
Which one was it, Judy?
It was in one of the beginning slides.
Navigate
Beyond
Life for
ECI. Yeah, for Navigate Life Texas. Let me see. Yeah, Michelle, mine worked.
If you go to navigatelifetexas.org,
Yeah.
and there's a search, and you can just put in ECI, and it should bring up all kinds, including that one.
I just used it, Michelle, and it worked fine for me. So maybe when you log off, maybe it'll work. It's a document that is 16 pages long, and it's basically Beyond the ECI next steps for your child. If you still have trouble with it, let me know, email me, and I will email it to you in PDF format. So no problem, happy to do that. I think we have another. Oh, okay, Karina, I don't know why it says that. Okay. Are we going to be able to watch again this meeting? Yes, I will send you the recording link. So I will make sure that I send that to you. Oh, the link for the surveys. Gosh, really? It should work.
Also, I wanted to say,
oh, hold on one second. Yeah, my link worked, Michelle. I'm not sure what happened, but it brought me right to it. But you know what? When you log off, it will bring you directly to the survey link. Sorry, I didn't mean to get confused there.
So I was going to say too, if anybody has any specific questions about their child's situation, or later any questions come up that you want to ask us, feel free to email us or call us at Family to Family, and we'll certainly try to help you out, point you in the right direction.
So I don't think if there's anything else, I think we're going to have you all sign off. Uni and Leslie, if you could stay on for just a minute. And you have our contact information. We will be having our next session in March, and I'll be sending you lots of email reminders. So thank you all so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks,
Got a question,
everybody.
Judy. Got a
Our
question.
pleasure. Our pleasure.
Got a question, Miss Judy. Can I talk to Miss Leslie?
Sure. Hold on one second. Let me just stop recording. Hold on one quick second.
Can I have a breakout room with Miss Leslie, please?
Yeah, hold on one second.
Thank you.
Where is my record? Oh, there it is.